Why don't we start with Gabriel and have you tell us what are the highlights from your first year? What's kind of the current state of events in Humboldt? Oh, and if you don't have it on, the click is about right here in the third.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
This year has been a lot of learning. Carolyn Albee, one of our supervisors, kind of coined it the best, I think, is when she said that we're building the plane as we fly it. And so that's kind of been our model. That's kind of been our mantra this year. And, you know, we're going to realize that we're going to make some mistakes, the ways, you know, we're doing things, but we're going to learn a lot. Some of the big things we learned and that were highlighted today in some of our speakers was the whole FERPA versus HIPAA debate and how are we going to integrate this whole thing. And so from that, getting county council's input as well as input from Humboldt County Office of Education's lawyers, we were able to kind of get an addendum to one of our ROIs that was able to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. And we were, you know, so far so good with that. Another thing that it's been really, you know, logistically kind of in our first year is the MOUs with the county and with the school district. That's been some difficulties. And Wendy Scott, one of our analysts who also co-authored the grant, really put a lot of effort into it and been really instrumental, her support too. In addition, Wendy also set up, you know, based on the first round of funding that happened, some variables and put a spreadsheet, which has been our documentation standard. And so in addition to our electronic health records from the county side, we've been able to bridge that gap. All that, you know, is kind of the bones of the plane. You know, we're able to get the bones going. And then we had we had some incidents that really solidified what we do, some really kind of unbelievable incidents that happened. One of them was a suicide at the school on campus, at one of the schools that we dealt with. And so we were able to really kind of test the bones and test our partnerships with our school personnel. Because I don't know if anybody's been to Humboldt before. It's a small, actually it's not small, it's a big area with a small population, and we're all really interconnected. So when something happens in our county, we all feel it. And so being able to mobilize a support system, a lot of us who was traumatized by the situation really was pretty remarkable. And Peter Stoll, who's here, Dr. Peter Stoll was really instrumental in that, and you know, has really helped kind of solidified our crisis response. In addition to Julie Beach, who's our supervisor, was able to, who also does the work of 2 supervisors, because she also supervises our mobile response team, was able to really come up with some really good strategies that really helped. And a week later, we had a murder that happened and was able to really mobilize that response too, based on that. So it took some tragedy to kind of enable us to learn what we needed to learn about where we needed to go with this grant. And it's been really beneficial. So far, even this year, we've had over 140 referrals throughout our county to the Humboldt Bridges Success Grant, and been able to mobilize some really, really good responses with lots of community feedback that's super duper positive. So that's a little bit of what's going on.
Congratulations for getting through all that.
Yes, thank you. And I think, I mean, it really shows we talk about relationships, and that's been something that's been thrown around. But when you have a really super duper strong team and everybody's able to kind of lean on each other and support each other, is really, I think, where the where the work gets to be done. And we've had a lot of issues. I know probably there's been a lot of stuff that we've been doing around secondary trauma. And so really, those relationships really help support our own trauma that we feel and are able to sustain this program. So.
Great. Remember, we've talked about relationships probably all day, both days, and that's great proof about how important it is. So thank you for sharing that. Ellie, you want to tell us about your story in Placer?
Oh, yes. Oh, good. It's working. Hi. This is my first Breaking Barriers. I just want to say thank you for having me. It's been a really energizing 2 days, and I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to tell you about our program. I feel so grateful to be in Placer County, where collaboration is tattooed on everybody. We here today have Children's System of Care folks here, Placer County Office of Education, we have our judge here, and one of our school district admin. That is so representative of this work and what we're doing. Me being up here doesn't paint the full picture of how collaborative this is. So we have 6 wellness programs that have started at 6 different schools in Roseville, from elementary all the way through high school. And that really takes Children's System of Care, the County Office of Education, and the school districts to be partners through that. So the number one goal for us this year, if you ask any of our 11 staff, what's the number one thing we're focused on? It's building relationship. I like to use the quote, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's really been our focus this year, especially because mental health in schools is still a newer topic, even though I feel like sometimes when we're in our mental health bubble, we think, why the heck doesn't everybody know this or do this? Being at the schools has really shown us how needed it is, but also really meeting teachers, especially where they're at, hearing the struggles and challenges that they go through and really listening to them before we come in and say, here are all the things you need to be doing, is really how we're strengthening our partnerships and hoping to make this program sustainable and successful. In addition to building relationships, we've also worked on a lot of crisis work as well this year, and I think that's been really strengthening our relationships as well. I think we have a vision, of course, of how we want our program to look. And if we package it and say, hey, other districts and counties, here's what worked, I think that will look different, especially next year. But right now, we really felt like it was our job to come in and help with whatever schools asked us to do. You want an after-school program? Great, we'll help you with that. You need someone to help with crisis situations? We're here for that. So really managing all of those and then coming back to the table with our partners and saying, here's what we've done the first few months, here's been the feedback we've received, how do we want to shift things a bit for next semester? That's really where our focus is.
Great, thank you. Natalie, in addition to, I see you're very well prepared because I can see your notes from here.
Thank you.
But I think one of the specific questions people will ask of you is that you all applied as a JPA.
Yes.
So you want to just explain part of that difference as part of your organization.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate the comment. Yes, I am well prepared. So essentially, our CAHELP, California Association of Health Link Professionals, is really encompassing of our Desert Mountain Children's Center, our Desert Mountain Charter SELPA, as well as our Desert Mountain SELPA. And we are very unique. We have, instrumentally have education departments, we have mental health departments, and really it's the idea of interconnecting ourselves. But then what does that look like for the landscape of painting a picture for our educators, providing training and supports, but continuing to broaden and deepen their knowledge and understanding of what mental health entails in the wellness component of that. So I just got this number, over 53 LEAs provide support and service, but really our grant is encompassing of the high desert and really the needs that we face, as well as what we see with our families and our communities. And those 18 LEAs, we're touching them. We are, it was more of this year of more exploration and just adoption of currently what they have using the PBIS, or Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports Framework, to really guide and sustain their work, but also encompassing the interconnected system framework. And I know that was brought up yesterday, and that's just how do we look at mental health and how do we look at those different layers of intervention and supports for students and for staff. And so it's been a great endeavor for this coming year. Essentially, it was a matter of growing our staff, their knowledge base with mental health language. What does that look like? Encompassing also education language. And so that was kind of some of the work around this first year, is how do we integrate that and make that happen, and understanding the different languages, right? And we got, these last 2 days have been a lot about that. Like, how do we work together? And so that's been just one of those things as we're the growing pains, but also opportunities, because that's what we are all about here, is how do we make that happen? And so it's been a really, the idea of, we do have an interdisciplinary team already, early childhood trauma-informed PBIS. And essentially they really encompass the teams that we want to see, PBIS specialists, our intervention specialists, our program managers, to really come together and say, what's that layer of expertise that we can provide for early childhood? And that's been just one of a huge taking off point for a lot of our folks, looking at how do we screen early on, ages and stages questionnaire, how do we look at providing more coaching opportunities for teachers, because that's what they need, is really that support in the classroom setting. So it's been a great endeavor and something we are rolling with and growing, and just first year, it was just been really a learning experience for us all.
Great. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
And actually, I do see that all of you are prepared. I should
Yeah.
have complimented Natalie. So Mary, I see you're as well prepared too. So why don't you tell us about Tulare?
So our
Yeah, go ahead and tap it to see.
Hello.
There you go.
So our program is part of the Tulare County Office of Education Behavioral Health Services, which is the Tulare County ERMS provider, educationally related mental health services provider for all students who have an IEP, special education students who need mental health services to access their education. About 4 years ago or so, we had one of our small single district rural schools reach out to us and ask if they could partner with us to have a social worker on campus 1 day a week. They felt that even though we provide services to special education students, they felt they had a larger population that really needed some extra support on their campus. And so we were able to contract with them and provide a social worker. I did 2.5 years out of the last 4 years with them before we got the grant, and it was very successful. And the superintendent for that small district is our biggest cheerleader. I love it when she's in our meetings because it makes my job so much easier. She convinces everybody else that they need a social worker at their campus. Yeah. And so we were lucky in that sense that we already had this kind of a framework that we were kind of working off of, and that's what the grant application that was submitted by our director was based on, the work that had been done at that school district by providing a social worker there. So now moving to, the grant being awarded and moving forward, we reached out to all of our districts. We are, again, kind of like Humboldt, a large geographical area, lots of small rural communities, and we have 43 school districts. And so we decided we were going to roll out the grant in 2 cycles of 24 partnerships each cycle, so that every district in our county would have an opportunity within the 4-year grant to partner with us and have a social worker for free 1 day a week for 2 years. And so we are currently have 24 school partnerships. We have a staff of 7 social workers, 5 of who are full-time in the schools, 4 different school sites a week. And then 2 of them are only at 2 school sites a week because they are our trainers. So we have a training team as well that goes out and provides training to school staff. We've been doing lots of professional development trainings for school staff on things like trauma-informed practices in schools, youth mental health first aid, safe talk, suicide awareness. So that's been really great, and to see the enthusiasm of the school districts to know that they can get these trainings for free has been really exciting. The social workers at the school sites, they're providing, kind of like what Ali said, we gave the schools a lot of flexibility in what that would look like, having a social worker at their site. So, which I think has been really helped our success and our relationships with the school districts grow. And because some schools wanted us to focus more on home visits to address SARB issues, attendance issues, and then other schools were more focused on, our parents don't have transportation, or there's a lot of barriers to getting these kids to the children's mental health clinics, so we need on-site mental health services. And so it just depends on what the need of the school is. We kind of tailored it for each site. So every one of our sites is very unique in how they're being served. We are providing individual student support such as mental wellness check-ins, short-term brief therapy. The goal is to connect these students, linkage and referral. We don't want to replace our children's clinics that we have, which are amazing in our county, but we just want to kind of bridge that gap. If there's a waiting list to get a student into mental health and they need the service right away, our social workers can provide interim services while they're waiting for their assessment date with the clinics. Let me see. They're providing a lot of linkage. Home visits and parent supports have been really successful as well. And because we are part of the Office of Ed and not the specific school district, it's been helpful to kind of bridge those relationships with parents and the school district because they see us as not being part of them. And so we have that extra layer where parents are really building relationships with our social workers and trusting our social workers, and that helps kind of facilitate, you know, the collaborative efforts of everybody to get the student the services that they need. Another piece of what we're doing with the grant is we're holding student mental wellness collaborative meetings with our county children's mental health clinics. And so this is, because this is a collaborative grant, it was awarded in partnership with our Health and Human Services Agency. So this has been a really important piece as far as, again, bridging those gaps between mental health and the school system. So we try to meet monthly, we realize with people's schedules, sometimes a face-to-face monthly meeting doesn't happen, so we're trying to do at least monthly phone and then quarterly face-to-face meetings with the local children's mental health clinic that serves that school site to discuss students on that campus who need or who are currently accessing children's mental health, and making sure that everybody's on the same page, that the school system knows what the treatment goals are and can support them at school to meet their treatment goals, just like their therapy, and then that their therapists also know what's going on at school and what are some of the barriers to them being successful at school due to their mental health. We also provide groups and we on different topics, self-esteem, anger management, building coping skills. Quickly the schools realize that 8 hours a week is not enough, and so to kind of maximize the time this school year coming in, we started in January in the school, about November, December in the schools of last year, and so now this fall semester, a lot of the schools were asking for more groups so they can get more bang for their buck. And another component that we have implemented now this fall was mindfulness. All of our staff, including our peer support specialists, we also have 4 peer support specialists on our staff, have all been trained in Mindful Schools curriculum from Emeryville. And so we are implementing Mindful Schools curriculum in classrooms at our school sites. We're asking, each site has picked anywhere from 3 to 5 classrooms to start off. So that's been a little bit slower than we would have liked. That's been one of our challenges, is that because it's 12 weeks of training before you can use that curriculum. So by the time we got everybody trained, it was the end of the semester last year, and we didn't have time to implement until now in the fall. And then we had some staff turnover as well, the typical logistical type of challenges that come with programs. So that's been a little bit slower, but we are in a good place at this point, I think, getting it up and going. And the feedback has been amazing from the teachers. We were a little worried. We're kind of a conservative county, and so we were a little worried about how it would be received, but it's been amazing. Our end of the 8-week surveys, the teachers are saying that they're gaining anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes of instructional time a day after having the 16 mindfulness lessons. So it's been amazing to see that. Let's see. So challenges, again, was kind of the confidentiality, the HIPAA, even though we have a really strong relationship with our Health and Human Services and our children's mental health clinics in the area. Everybody worries about making sure we don't violate HIPAA. And so we started using the releases of information. Some of our clinics became very proactive, and they had a list of what schools we were partnered with and that we had provided at one of the Children's Services Improvement Committee meetings. And they started just including, if a referral was coming from a student that was at one of our sites, they just started including an ROI in the intake packet so that they wouldn't have a challenge to communicate with us. And now recently there was some clarification regarding the behavioral health services role in the mental health plan, and so that's kind of helped also to open up that and overcome that barrier where we're able to now communicate a little bit more freely with our children's mental health. And now as we're starting to plan for our second cycle coming up in the fall of 2020, and we're helping our current school districts to look at their sustainability plan. So part of the contract was that we provide the social worker free 1 day a week for 2 years, and then the school in return promises that they'll take those 2 years to secure funding, most of them out of like their LCAP funding, to sustain that position for an additional 2 years. So that the goal is that, they'll have the 4 years total. So now as we're getting into that next phase, as we're having conversations with our current districts, especially some of our really small K through 8, we have some as small as 140 students for their whole district. And so looking at barriers to finance the sustainability piece for the next 2 years. So I was really excited yesterday with some of the fiscal and finance conversation, because it gave me some ideas to take back and look at some different options of how we can maybe help our small schools to be able to sustain this work that everybody is super excited about. So when this grant was first written by our director, her goal is that at the end of the 2 years, no school would know how to function without a social worker. After 2 months, I started receiving phone calls and emails, how can I get more time? How can I get the social worker here 2 or 3 days a week? So that was super exciting to us that our goal for 2 years came true in a matter of 2 months. We had one district that in May was very adamant they wanted their social worker full-time and were willing to fund it. Unfortunately, we had to tell them no, because she's also at 3 other schools that love her, and it wouldn't be fair. We promised we let the schools know that bar any thing out of our control, like staff turnover, that they would have the same social worker for the 2 years. And so we wanted to stay true to that. But it's been exciting to see how much the schools are valuing the service and really seeing the benefits.
So a couple of things that have been consistent here in answers are how important relationships are, how important communication is, and how different the system can be delivered based upon local need. And I really wanted to emphasize that piece, because as the subsequent grant cycles come through, they're really going to want to know who you are as you might apply for a grant to do it for your local community. So the range of delivery, I think, was important for people to hear. And you did a great job starting off on challenges, and you mentioned a couple of big ones, but I'd like to hear if there were other ones, partly so that people can hear what they might be faced with, but also, and how did you deal with challenges, if you have more to add on that.
I do. So Humboldt County, it's its own culture. So we've had a long history of the schools and county behavioral health kind of being on adversarial terms. So one of the things, up until probably about 5 years ago, is that behavioral health didn't go to any IEP meetings. We didn't even sign anything. We couldn't even be on campuses. And so we've had a really neat kind of leadership change. My supervisor, our deputy director, Jeremy Nilsson's been really adamant about that, about being able to bridge that gap. And so there's been a forum where education and behavioral health get together and they talk about these kind of issues. And from that, we've been able to really bridge those gaps. And so that was the preconceived notion going in there, that we've had clinicians for a while who have said, well, we can't go to IEP meetings, we can't go on school campuses. So that has really changed. And because of that, we've been able to collaborate a lot more. And I think there's some more work that we need to do around that, but it's really great to have us all kind of on the same page looking at mental health. There's also been the ERMS program that's been developed by Mindy Fattig, and that's really kind of brought another kind of lens to school mental health. So when I started in 2004, I was working at a high school. I think I was the only MFT that was hired by a district, and now there seems to be therapists and social workers on every campus. So there's really been a need that we've seen, and our ACEs scores have shown that. We have some of the highest ACEs scores in all of California. And so the amount of trauma that our students deal with every day is remarkable. And it's really been nice to have such a concerted effort to really deal with this, because before we were all working in silos, and it's kind of like what we're talking about here at Breaking Barriers is really getting in and really working together. We've also identified other areas. I know there was some cheering over here for the 0 to 5, but we also have a clinician and what we call a navigator that the school employs, a case manager position that's doing only 0 to 5 clients and working in preschools and identifying play groups. And we use a practice called TheraPlay that's been very successful. So we're looking to continue that on. And the way we're going to continue this, I think it's amazing when you do a good job, how the money follows. And I think that's what one of our presenters was talking about, is like, look at what you need to do first, and look at how you want to infect change, and then the money will follow. And I think, a lot of that, we've got some great ideas from Mr. Briscoe today, or yesterday, and it's really, made us think, and we'll get together with our financial people and look how we can really sustain this. Because right now, we're looking at, our EPSDT funds, keeping this going. So, but, that only gets a certain subsect. The good part about this grant is we can get everybody, not just the ones that we're looking, that are identified as, mental health or Medi-Cal recipients. Everybody is in our system, and I think that's what we really need to focus on. And it was great to hear at this conference that that's been echoed. So it's kind of where we're at right now.
Great. I love how often I keep hearing the word bridges. So there's a lot of building bridges here. We've actually talked about breaking barriers becoming breaking barriers, building bridges. And so thank you for adding that. Ellie, do you have challenges you want to share?
Yes, I do. I think one in particular for us, so our program is really through a PBIS and MTSS framework, which is great because our districts were already on board with doing that. I think some of what a challenge that we face and I wish we had done differently is maybe really laid out the readiness of each school in that framework before we started. Everyone's commitment to it was very strong. And I think because we have such a great collaboration in Placer County, we were sort of like, commitment's at 100%, let's get going. And I think we could have maybe stepped back and done like a readiness checklist just to see about some specific pieces where each site was at with that. Not so that we could have said, sorry, we're not going to work with you, but so we could have said, what's our plan for managing the readiness for these steps? We're doing that now, and doing it in the middle of the school year is just more challenging, but workable. And then the other big challenge we had was hiring. First and foremost, when the funding with the OAC grant changed, we had to get creative, and our county and our community partners were very behind that, and we were able to use some MHSA dollars to help make up the difference. And so we have 11 staff, including myself and the Seesaw clinical supervisor. We have 6 family and youth community liaisons, which is a person who has lived experience in some system that our families and students face. And then we also have 5 mental health specialists who are either trained social workers, clinical counselors, or marriage and family therapists. That position created some challenges because initially we were going to hire school social workers, and apparently they're unicorns, and we couldn't find enough to staff our program. So we saw it as an opportunity to get creative and really broaden the pool for who can be working in schools, who can be doing this work. As an MFT, I feel really proud and excited that we are showing schools and showing others that MFTs can also be in schools doing this work alongside school counselors, alongside social workers. There's room for everyone. There's plenty enough work to go around. And each of their trainings have overlap, but also a lot of differences. So I feel like there's been a lot of benefit already into having all of those different hats in the ring. But it was a lengthy process because we had to write a whole new job description to include those folks. And if any of you have written a job description or worked with your unions, you know how cumbersome that process can be. So lucky for you, all of our job descriptions are free and on the PCOE website. And you're welcome to take a look at them. I feel really passionate about us having those liaisons in our program as well. We were just talking earlier about how great it's been to have, for example, a liaison at a truancy meeting where they were able to say to a family who was feeling probably some vulnerability about admitting some of the things they were going to have to do to work on this, to have that liaison say, when I was in this situation, these are the programs I accessed, this was my comfort level with it, and this is how I got through that. To have that at the table and to have schools really loop those folks into the fold, to have them be a part of leadership, to have family voice and families at the table, I think has been a huge benefit. That doesn't sound like a challenge, I realize, but I think, there are ongoing challenges with figuring out how we keep that voice at the forefront, because we have to manage students, not just the student we're working with, but keeping other students safe, the safety and the retention of our teachers and staff. So balancing all of that while also including family voice is an ongoing challenge that we're going to just keep dealing with.
Great, thank you. Natalie, how about for you?
So speaking of the JPA, right, and where that all fits, so I like to frame it more of like a hospital, right? We have our CAHELP hospital, and essentially there's all these departments within that JPA that are working, at times independently, right? And so it's the idea of how do we work interconnectedly, how do we work to interconnect ourselves? And that's been an opportunity. I'm going to reframe that. An opportunity to really see, hey, this great work that's happening within those departments, and how do we work together on that? And so that's been a great challenge. I'm going to say that, great opportunity, because again, we're trying to betterment our community. The opportunities are there, and so it's a matter of how do we look at those proper supports for our folks, excuse me. The other thing that's been quite interesting is it's the Triage grant. And so when you're meeting with educators, Triage implies triage. And so for our folks, we're saying, hold, we're more preventative, and that's really where we want to be. In the school settings, coming from the school sites, we need to be, I appreciate the comment yesterday, SSTs, yes, all of those pieces, right? We're meeting we're connecting with our families. We have an outreach team that's able to do that. More not the readily of just passing out flyers, but essentially saying, what are some more case management? Being part of SARB, I mean, essentially those families need it the most, right? Where we've come to this point now, what more can we do? And so, sounds like an opportunity, right, Allie? Yeah. But essentially what we're trying to say is what can we do to really look at creating that landscape of, we're really trying to look at those basic practices that school sites can implement. So restorative practices, what does that look like? Social emotional learning, training, what does that look like? Even mental health awareness. 101, right? Some of our teachers need those very basic skill sets, and one of those things we've been really pushing is youth mental health first aid. And again, being a trainer, it's essentially just something that anybody in our community can access and use. And essentially that's what we're trying to lean for, is really providing those accessible resources and supports. And it's really about broadening and really deepening our scope of our work. And again, it's really, the other component is in the classroom. What's happening in our classrooms? I know a lot of teachers are reaching out and saying we need more supports. We're having students that are they're elopers, right? Running away. We're having aggressive behaviors. So again, it's a matter of what can we do early on. And again, being more preventative, using universal screening, which has been a big focal point for a lot of our districts who are looking at district-wide, using the student risk screening scale, or the SRSS. That's a big deal. And so there's a lot of key components that are coming down the way for us, and really providing those external supports for them.
Great, thank you. And one thing, if you're not aware, youth mental health first aid grants are frequently available through the Department of Education. So if you're not on that list from the department, let me know, and I'll help you get connected, because that is another great opportunity. Now, you did start to address challenges earlier, but do you have more that you want to say about that?
Well, I thought of another one.
Okay.
When Gabriel was talking about being able to serve other students, as an ERMS provider, this is one of the most exciting things about getting the grant, was that we were now able to serve all students in Tulare County, not just our special ed students who had mental health on their IEP. As we quickly realized, because on the ERMS side, if a student doesn't have Medi-Cal, we just use SELPA funding and we cover the services anyway. Well, now on the side of the grant, we have a lot of students who need mental health services, but they have private insurance. And so that's been a challenge, trying to navigate the private insurance realm, and working with parents. Sometimes it's a financial barrier for them because of high copays. Other times it's just, they work full-time and they have a hard time making appointments. And so we had, in last May, early June, when we were getting ready to go into summer, our social workers were really struggling because they had students they had been supporting for quite a while for the semester, and they didn't feel comfortable that the student was going to go through summer with no support, and trying to link them to ongoing mental health services when they had private insurance was a big challenge that we faced. So we're working on that.
Great. So particularly because we do want to encourage more people to either implement practices or go for grant opportunities, what is it that you think others out there could benefit from hearing from what you've learned, particularly in the area of replicatability?
Well, once again, relationships, that starts it off, and realizing, everybody, within that relationships, there's the personalities too. So whatever you're going to replicate needs to kind of be given over to those personalities. So it's I think it's a process. It's not something you're going to do overnight. We have 32 different districts that we're working with, and so there's a lot of moving pieces. I think if you're going to, whatever you're going to replicate, if you're going to replicate our program, part of it is you got to be able to make mistakes, and you got to be able to learn from your mistakes. And it's a lot easier to get forgiveness and permission sometimes too. And it's really important for those relationships to be able to kind of work with them and see what their strengths are, as you deliver the program, because it really is about relationships. We are working with people. They're not widgets. So there's not really one size fits all, and I think that's okay. I think if you're going to be successful, you got to meet people where they're at, and that includes systems too. Humboldt County has its own culture, and we have 32 different districts with their own cultures too. So however you get in there, it's really important not to step on people's toes, but also to advocate for what you want. We have 2 people that are really have been great at doing that, have been doing all the rollouts the whole time. Julie Beach and Carolyn Albee. If you guys could stand up real quick, I just got to give you guys a shout out. Come on, stand up. These 2 guys right here are all about collaboration. I feel so blessed to have them on my team to do this kind of work. Both of them have really extensive experience working in schools and working in county systems, and just really gelled together. And if I could replicate them, I would do that. That's how I would get a good program, because they are really the backbone of it. So
It's always the good people, huh?
it's always the people.
Ellie, how about from Placer?
I have 2 things I want to share. One is sort of a contradiction, but I think about the idea of planning slowly and implementing quickly. And what I mean by that is, don't be afraid to spend a lot of time creating a team who wants to brainstorm what a program like this could look like. Figure out what it is, the problem that you want to solve, the solution that you want to get to, and then spend some time thinking about what that could look like. But then once you implement, don't be afraid to try some things. I think that being here the past couple of days has been really affirming for me in our program, that it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to try things. We're all doing that, and being in a room of other people doing that is really affirming that it's okay to do. So find people on your team who are okay with you trying things, and then maybe having to pivot when they don't go as well as you had planned. The other thing that I really hold on to, and my staff and I talk about a lot, is be a thermostat and not a thermometer. So I think it's really easy to feel reactive when you're doing this work, and to take things personally, and to feel like when something goes wrong that you have to fix it right away. And to walk into this work being a thermostat where you don't take on the temperature of everyone around you. If everyone else is freaking out, you don't have to do the same thing. You can walk into whatever problem you're trying to solve and look at it objectively, because it's really easy, no matter what program you're working in. This is kids' lives that are being affected, so it feels really important, and it feels like we need to react, but to be the one who can step back and look at something and then make decisions, I think really goes a long way in doing a new project like this.
Great, thank you. Natalie, what did you learn that people can learn from?
I know it's the go slow to go fast. The same idea that Allie was just sharing. There's a lot of steps involved, and it takes time and giving yourself grace in all that work. And it's a matter of really having a great team behind you. And I do have a team here at the table who are just behind all this work as well, really trying to connect with families, really trying to connect with agencies, really doing already this work, but how do we continue to build on that layer? And so that's just been a great journey to be on with everyone. The other thing is that common language. And again, just noting previously how we talked about mental health language. What does that mean? Even the CANs, yes, I didn't even know what CANs, right? I mean, just some of those simple, right, things and how we phrase that for our educators. Again, coming from the educator lens, I could talk all day about what SSTs and IEPs and what does that look like, but if we don't have a common understanding and common ground, then things won't progress. And so that's where we are with this work, is how do we continue to progress and really understand those components as well as team structures. And really it starts at the district level. Above all, we need to start at district, because that's where we get our stakeholders, that's where we sustain this work, and that's really where we've tried to invest most of our time in trying to help them understand you need to sustain this. It takes system, data, and practices for us to move forward. And so that's kind of the big message. If anybody's familiar with PBIS, that's where it is. Data, system, practices, and what does that look like at that site level, district level, preschool program level.
So one thing that I've heard from all of you is it isn't just about the kids and the families, but the staff as well. Mm-hmm. How about for you?
I think my peers up here have covered everything. The relationships and engaging the stakeholders. We do twice a year we're doing stakeholder meetings to discuss where the grant is and what other areas we might be able to support. And so that's been really helpful as well, to engage stakeholders and get community feedback to know, like where are we going, and to build our program based on that. So.
Great, thank you too. One of the things that I know was looked for in the application in the first place was the possible use of evidence-based practices, or what it is that you would choose to use. So could you address what is it in terms of evidence-based practices, or what brought you to choose from this wide range of opportunities out there of ways to deliver? What did you do, and how do you know if that's taking you to success?
Well, I think a lot of the evidence-based practices have those validity measures, and I think our use of other things like the CANs has been helpful. The one that we chose TheraPlay is there was an agency that I used to be the clinical director for who used that, and so that was kind of one of the practices that was identified as evidence-based and up and coming, and we tried the PCI, positive child intervention therapies, and there was a lot of kind of logistical issues with that. So that was so TheraPlay seemed like something that had garnered some steam in our community and something that we could build on, rather than trying to create something new out of nowhere. And I think we also kind of use, we don't do it to fidelity, but we have, trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy that we employ. There's been some trainings here and there around solution focused brief therapy, which I think really works well with this model, because we don't see clients long term, and we're looking to refer them out as much as we can, although Humboldt is really impacted. It's kind of like a provider desert up there. So that's been an issue. So we've tried to kind of work with some of those other programs out there. There may be not so much mental health, like the Big Brothers, Big Sisters kind of stuff, kind of programs out there to kind of bridge some of those gaps. So those are kind of some of the stuff we're doing. On the school side, I know PBIS and MTSS are big programs that have been used on that side. So we kind of try to, in the spirit of collaboration, kind of marry those programs together and marry those. So it becomes something that kids and families can readily, get to. We can kind of tailor it towards them, because if we're not focused on on the kids and and their issues, and we're trying to just put a program on them. It's been shown not to work, at least in our system.
Great, thank you.
So every one of our schools was already using PBIS. That was a requirement to be part of this project. They use MTSS and PBIS. So that framework is such a great opportunity to then allow for flexibility and creativity around whatever evidence-based practices clinicians feel are best, the school feels are best. So groups look very different at each site. The high schools run quite a few groups, and all of the programs they use are evidence-based, but they really get to decide which ones they want to use. They are choosing to fund training opportunities for staff to attend those, because I think there's a fine line between evidence-based practices and also creating a program that feels sustainable for other districts and counties. And implementing EBPs is expensive. Sometimes there's not a lot of research on how equitable they are or if they meet the needs of a diverse population. They're not always tried with the variety of students that we serve. So I think, I'm hoping that in our project we're showing if you have a framework that's evidence-based, then you can really use your creativity and flexibility to figure out what specific treatment you want to use, especially because we really utilize our community providers who often do a lot of evidence-based practices as well.
Great, thank you.
And our evidence-based practice has really been PBIS. That's really the foundation of this work, and essentially continue to build on that with the interconnected system framework, or ISF. And again, it's just the idea of continuing to build continuum of supports, also then encompassing our community resources. There was something I was going to know. And our trainings really encompass evidence-based practices. I mean, we really look at what that does entail. Again, looking at the sustainability of those different interventions. Examples, check and check out is an intervention that we talk about. Social skills, I mean, just curriculum. We really try to focus on evidence-based social skills curriculum. And so there's a lot of great support that we have amongst our different teams that provide different training opportunities, and so that's always something we really rely on, is those evidence-based practices for our folks.
Fabulous, thank you. And Mary?
And so not all of our schools do PBIS, but those who do, we have requested a copy of their matrix, and the social workers are using it to help supplement and support the school in their PBIS efforts. We also use trauma-informed practices. We are using the One Circle Girls curriculum to run girls groups on different topics that are challenging to girls in the 8 to 17 age range. And then our mindfulschools.org implementation too.
Great, what a great list for you all. So to wrap up, can you tell us if you have any sites that you think would be absolutely wonderful for people to come use, and or what is it that you want to end with that I didn't get to ask you, or that you really want to tell people about?
So the sites, you say, like if you want to...
Like if I wanted to say, well, let me come see what you do up there, is there a place you would send me to in Humboldt County?
Yeah, we'd send you to our plaza, where we have all our behavioral health. We are an integrated program with child welfare, as well as mental health, or public health. So that integration in itself is, you know, we've been doing it for the last 20 years. It's interesting to kind of just see how we work, you know. And then we have meetings often at Humboldt County Office of Education. And then we would take you on a tour of Humboldt County, and you would see the unbelievable topography that we have, the trees, and the diversity in cultures that we have up there. You know, based on geography, we have a large Native American population with 10 different tribes, and we have differing areas, and so you'd see the differences in how it's all being done, but you'd also see the similarities too. It would be a great learning opportunity for anybody to come see a culture that's been behind the redwood curtain, that's kind of had an opportunity to flourish and grow without the big city involved. So it's like there's areas out there that, you know, you can get to across Eureka in 3 minutes. That's my commute at work. So, and we're always, if anybody out there, we're always looking for clinicians. So if you get tired of spending your life on the freeway, come on up to Humboldt.
It is beautiful. I will agree with that. Ellie, how about you? What's the
I'm not
final
sure
from
Placer County is as beautiful as Humboldt, but we do have a job posted right now for our program. So if you're interested, you're welcome to come visit any of our sites. You can contact me. I don't know if our contact information is anywhere accessible for folks, but I'm at table 11 and I'm happy to chat with you if you want to know more. One other thing I just want to highlight briefly, and sort of a takeaway, I think, to think about if you're going to try to do this work is, so I am the coordinator for this program, and I work for PCOE, and then the clinical supervisor, who she and I are, it's weird to not have her here with me because we're always together. She is a clinical supervisor at CSOC. She's worked in child welfare and mental health there. And then all of our staff are stationed in school districts. So just the complexity and interconnectedness of that, I think it's a huge shout out to all of the people in Placer County who've been doing this work for years and established that collaboration. And I just encourage you to think about how possible that is and how you could make that happen, or how you could grow the collaboration you're already doing.
Great, thank you. Natalie?
So yes, we have a few sites. Early childhood has done a lot of great work, again, building their interdisciplinary teams. I'd be happy to chat too as well. I'm at table 17 about what that looks like in terms of visits. But I wanted to note something that really stuck out for me is the promoting wellness. And often we get so caught up in our work and just running. And so even for our staff who feel like overwhelmed at times, there's so much things on their plate. And so to have them take a moment to self-reflect and really provide them with self-care as well. And I think that's something to really highlight because takes a lot of work. They already have so much happening on their site, on their campus, a lot of new challenges that they feel are happening this year for them. Again, going back to behaviors that they experience a lot of calls going out to crisis response and just feeling overwhelmed. And so I think we have to give teachers credit, educators credit that there's things happening, and to respect the fact that they feel like they're doing a lot, but to really take a step back and help them look at more preventative components. And so that's been one of these things that I've taken away, is just giving them some time to kind of process things and before we feel like it's another something. And really we're trying to say PBIS and this interconnected system framework are beautifully intertwined. And so how do we kind of reflect that for them?
Super, thank you. And Mary?
If you would like to visit, just reach out. We have 24 sites you can come visit. Any of them, I'm sure, would welcome you, and to see. Like I said, every one of them is very different. It can be very different. There's some similarities, but I'm at table 20. So if you'd like to chat some more, I also had brought just a few brochures. They're out by the sign-in table if you're interested in that. Moving forward, I think kind of like next steps. I know there's a lot of talk yesterday about family engagement, so that's kind of same kind of feedback we're getting from all of our schools is we need more family engagement, we need more parent education, and so that's one of our goals for the next year is to put together a training menu of trainings that we're going to provide for parents. We have a pretty good menu that we're working off of for school staff and community type of trainings, but now we want to focus more on parent trainings and just increasing the mental health literacy of our community.
Wonderful. I personally want to thank you so much. I know you've put a lot of time into conversing ahead of time and preparing for this, as well as what you do every day, and to your teams, because you have more than 2 people working for you. You brought teams, and so please join me in appreciating our panelists and their teams. Thank you so much.